Hello, everyone. Brother Al McClaney with the weekend stewardship video. And that is a chart you're looking at that is the S&P 500 kind of represents the whole market. But let's get more into that after we read the disclaimer. No advice should be seen as a recommendation or endorsement, as I am not a licensed financial advisor. This is for educational purposes only. So you want to do your own research. So in the trading world, we would say that chart's a thing of beauty. And you could see my cursor. This is the last couple of months. And you could just see how just going up, going up. You've probably seen it in your 401k if you got individual retirement account and you've got just um, any assortment of stocks. If it's diversified, you probably saw that P&L or your profit loss just going up. And that is what we would say, wow, thing of beauty. And you can get caught up in this. In fact, I catch myself and constantly have to guard my heart against starting to make an idol out of this or see this as putting my trust in the stock market because it has been let the good times roll. And this reminds me of this scripture here. And this is from Luke 12, verses 16 through 21. And if you have a Bible that gives you titles above certain passages of the scripture, this is probably said um, bigger barns. And really, this video, stewardship video, is am I trusting in a what or who? The Message Bible says, then he told them this story, and this is Jesus. The farm of a certain rich man produced a terrific crop. He talked to himself, which is always trouble when you start talking to yourself. What can I do? My barn isn't big enough for this harvest. Then he said, here's what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll gather in all my grain and goods, and I'll say to myself, Self, you've done well. You've got it made and can now retire. Take it easy and have the time of your life. Just then, God showed up and said, Fool, tonight you die. And your barn full of goods. Who gets it? That's what happens when you fill your barn with self and not with God. And friends, I can tell you, first of all, if you look through the scripture and read it in different translations, how much the pronoun I and my is used, self, all through this. And then under the last scripture that says, that's what happens when you fill your barn with self and not with God. And you can take out self and put any type of idolatry type item in there. Self, I mean, the worshiping of yourself, make an idol of yourself. Or you can put stock market, portfolio, job, your position. This is when you fill your barn with your stock folio and not with God. When you fill your barn with my IRA and not with God. When you fill your barn with my job position and not with God. So again, am I trusting in a what or it or they or myself? That's what the question becomes. What am I putting my trust in? Or is it who I'm putting my trust in? Trust not in what, but the who, which is Jesus. And that's what we need to be doing. Uh, says it best in Psalm 37, verses 3 and 5. Trust in the Lord and do good. Then you will live safely in the land and prosper. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you your heart's desire. Commit everything you do to the Lord. Trust him, and he will help you. And that trust in the Lord, he gives you the desires of your heart. First, he's transforming your heart so that your desire is only in what he in alignment with him. And John 15, 7 and 8 reiterates that. It says, but if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father, which means when we say remaining in him, in some translation says abide in him, right? You're following everything that the master wants. You're aligning your heart with him, or you're aligning him to transform our hearts to desire only what he what pleases him. versus the what. So trust not in what, but in the who. And that's the relationship with Christ. So let's trans kind of transition over and let's look at the stock market. So this week in earnings, not like last week, got a few things. The market may move because it moves, but there's a couple of large companies that are going to be interesting. First, Archer. Archer is in the area. It's a smaller company. It's not going to move the market, but it's in drone technology. And we know that's become very prominent in the defense industry, small company. Now, D-Wave, and this is interesting because this is in the quantum computing, and that's becoming a huge area in technology. Then OKLO is also in the technology field. And then, of course, we've got AMD, which is reporting on Thursday, huge in the chips. And if you've been watching the market, the semiconductor area has been on fire. Cisco's in technology. So anything really uh, related to technology has just been moving. I was listening to a weekend um, news, not newscast, but a radio show with Jerry Tuma, and he was just talking about anything associated with artificial intelligence technology has been on fire. Now, could we be risking a bubble? Absolutely. Eventually it will burst, right? That bubble. Be a tech bubble. But it doesn't look like we're close to that happening. The other thing associated with that, which we've talked about on this video, the energy consumption required, the electricity. So that's another play that's out there. So that's what's being reported this week. And of course, as always, not recommendations, do your own research. But so in the area of technology, here is NVIDIA. And all eyes, even though this week they're not reporting, all eyes have been on NVIDIA. May 20th, which happens to be my wife's birthday, is when NVIDIA reports. So you can see this chart's been kind of meandering along. Then we had a big dip, and then lately it's been, you know, going getting reestablished. So a lot of eyes going to be on Nvidia because it's squarely in the chip production and AI movement. So the other part you could do is look at exchange traded fund. Again, not a recommendation, research, but there's an exchange traded fund, SMH, a little rich, $566 a share. But you can look at here's a top 10 that's in this SMH exchange rated fund. You see NVIDIA is the biggest holding. Taiwan Semiconductors next. Then you got Intel. There's AMD. So you can see these are the individual companies that are driving that sector, which is the semiconductor or chips sector. So you may look at, hey, I'll invest in SMH and get the whole broad area, or look at these individual companies and maybe look at investing in them. And then there's another way we've talked about before, Infidelity. Once again, I'm not recommending Fidelity as a brokerage company, but they do have a product where you can do slices, even slices of this SMH by dollar amounts, and the minimum amount is $10. So you could get a slice of a slice, really. And here's the overall market. Starting QQQ technology, look at that. That's almost similar to how we open this video. That's QQQ, which is heavily exposed to technology. And you can see it's been taking off. SPY has been mirroring. It's not as prominent as QQQ, but of course, SPY is the overall Standards and Poor 500 largest companies, which the heavy exposure because they've been doing so well in technology. And that's it for this week's stewardship video. As always, remember Jesus is Lord. That's the who we put our trust in, not in the what. And you can fill in that blank or whatever the what is. If it's outside of Jesus, it's an idol. I mean, it's idolatry. We're making an idol out of it. So that's this week's stewardship video. As we always say, remember Jesus is Lord. Therefore, He's the owner and master. But we are playing that important role of His faithful stewards, meaning we manage by the principles that we learn from him. And this is this week's stewardship video. We'll see you next week.